Hey everybody, today on Tales from Behind the DM Screen, I'm going to tell you why Dungeons & Dragons is slowly destroying itself, and why that's okay. Alright, before I dive into the whole clickbaity title that hopefully got you to click on this video, let me just say, to begin with, I apologize for the length of time between the last one of these and this one, between the holidays, and due to the fact that I was exposed to and caught COVID over the holidays when I was at a family dinner. I haven't had a lot of energy and a little bit of brain fog and whatever, so I haven't really been able to put one of these together. So, but I'm here, I'm back, I'm on the upswing, I'm almost out of quarantine, so why not? Here we go. So, D&D, why I think D&D is slowly kind of destroying itself, and why that's a perfectly fine thing to be happening. So, this is going to cover a lot of ground. It's going to cover a lot of my gaming history, stuff I've probably touched on before, but also it's just going to kind of talk about just the evolution of D&D, and why I think that you know, the game that is being played now on tons and tons of tables and being enjoyed and loved is really nothing like the game that I started off with. And, you know, they're kind of Dungeons and Dragons in name only, and with the basic premise, right, of you are adventurers, you are in a fantasy world, and you're going on adventures to do X and accomplish this, and leveling and stuff like that. But all that aside, like I said, there's going to be a lot of ground covered here, so I apologize. To begin with, this is going to be probably a longer video. So, the impetus of this idea and this conversation piece that I'm having with you right now is based off the fact that I picked this up at my local game store. Yeah, I know you can go to like Amazon and whatever, and you can get these super cheap, but my local retailer, my local game store has been very good to me, so I always buy the new D&D stuff. Now, this is really weird for me too, because I almost always I buy the new book that comes out, right? And I had planned on like actually doing a review of this, and thought, yeah, but eventually I was just like, you know what, there's like 8 million Tasha's Cauldrons reviews out there, so there's no reason for me to throw my hat in the ring on that one. Maybe for the next one if I get my dander up about it or something. But regardless, you know, I go out and I get these and I read them. You know, I mean, you know, and when I read, yes, I mean, my daughter actually just said, like, you can't see, like, the library of D&D books are over here. You can't see the stacks of D&D books that are over here that I haven't found room on bookshelves yet for. So my daughter actually mentioned who actually had COVID as well, and she's also well, and thank you, and I appreciate any well wishes and whatever that you hand out. So we spent a lot of time kind of sequestered in the basement, and she actually looked over and she's like, when have you had a chance to read all of these? And for the most part, the books that I read, very few books I read cover to cover. What I do is I flip through them. If I find something that I find interesting and that I think that I could use, then I dive into that, and I really, like, you know, pick that apart. But I mean, for the most part, like, after reading thousands of role-playing game books, and I don't say that to brag, I just, you know, it's one of those things that's been a hobby of mine for 4 decades. You know, I mean, I have the ability to kind of parse the information just because of my acclimation to it, and just, like, you know, what I've been able to discern myself. Anyway, my point in all of this is that I picked this up and I started looking through it, and I started reading it, and I was like, wow, there's like a ton of stuff in here, and it is a fabulous book for people to play 5th edition. I think that the myriad of options and ideas and things that they present are fantastic, and, you know, fantastic. Literally fantastic. But no, I mean, like, literally, like, it is a wonderful resource for people to play the game. And the thing is that 5th edition is slowly, and not really even slowly anymore. It has become and is like a like a game system, role-playing game system that just has tons of modules that are just available for DMs and players alike to just kind of pick and choose and create whatever they want, and create whatever fantasy world they want, and have that fantasy world inhabited by whatever they want. And, you know, what do you want? Steampunk? You got it. Do you want, you know, like Stone Age? You got it. Do you want, you know, like a high fantasy world like Forgotten Realms? You bet. Go for it. You want more like magic is like kind of scary and foreign and weird, like Lord of the Rings, things like that? Yeah, exactly. You can create whatever you want. Now, I mean, I do believe that 5th edition games do. I do think that they lend themselves to being played high fantasy. I mean, that just speaks to the fact that, like, you know, it seems like almost all characters, like almost all classes now, use magic. Like, you know, it used to be, you know, wizards had magic spells. And clerics had like restorative powers, but you know, nobody else really did. It was just like, and so like magic was amazing. I mean, it was, you know, I mean, admittedly, like a first level wizard back in the day, or a magic user back in the day, was very frail. You could have 1 hit point easily. Well, then again, I mean, technically almost any class could have 1 hit point, but that's neither here nor there. My point is that, like, but you had to remember, like, that magic user had the ability to cast a spell that could put 6 people to sleep. Like, just wave your hand and then thump, 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 thump. People would just fall asleep. I mean, and you know, and be at their mercy. So it's one of those things where yeah, they were like frail, and they were scary, and they were intimidating, and people were scared of wizards, and rightfully so. A wizard that had access to a fireball could literally burn down an entire village, you know, just with 1 spell. So you know, they should have been feared, and they should have been like shunned by society and things like that. But anyway, I'm like, as I said, I'm just going to be all over the place with this. You know, some people say, why don't you script this stuff out and make it more structured? And maybe I will. I don't know. I doubt it. But I mean, I've always been better flying by the seat of my pants with this stuff. But regardless, my point is that 5th edition has whatever options you want for whatever game you want to run. And that is a strength of that system. And for a lot of people, like myself, I see it as kind of a weakness. I see it as a situation where you have players that are coming to tables who are saying, well, I've got these, you know, 27 books here that have all these different things in them, and I want to be a so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so with so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And the DM is just like, well, and this is something also that, I mean, this is a topic I thought about doing for a video, but there tends to be more rules as written campaigns now, more than kind of like DMs being able to have the ability to just create on the fly. And that's fine. I mean, and I'm going to be saying that's fine, like over and over, I think, in this video. If you're sitting at a table with players and a dungeon master, and you are all having fun, it doesn't matter what you're playing. It doesn't matter what rule set you use. It doesn't matter what options you use. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. If you are sitting down and you are having fun, the fun is what matters. Period. And I mean, I guess that's like the biggest thing, right? But getting back to my whole point, how is D&D kind of destroying itself? Well, we got to go back. I mean, you got to go back to the beginning of D&D. And I'm not going to, you know, there's tons of fantastic videos out there. You can just type in history of D&D on YouTube, and you're going to find like hundreds probably. But so I'm not going to bore you with that. But The game that was created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson went through a lot of changes, and and I grew up playing like my first exposure to Dungeons and Dragons was with basic D&D. After I got that, I went through the process of tracking down and finding earlier versions of it, the white box, and then I played AD&D as well, and then I played second edition, third edition. I played all the editions. I played Pathfinder, right? And I have tons and tons of rule books for like old school rules revival and variants and like CNC, 13th Age. There's lots of different options out there as far as those go, and I own most of those rule books just because I like collecting them and I like reading them and I like stealing things from those. But when you started off playing D&D, and especially if you played basic D&D, we loved the idea of leveling up our characters, but your characters didn't last really all that long. I remember I played Dungeons and Dragons, and I had a buddy named Joe Giefer that lived a couple doors down from me, and we had an ongoing campaign all summer, and his thief was the only character who lived to be 3rd level. All the other kids in the neighborhood, their characters were just dropping like flies, one after the other. And they rarely, some people made it to 2nd level, but just a unlucky trap or something would get them, or they bit off a little too much they can chew. And then at the end of the summer, there was this big, this is like 3 months of playing. We're camping out in tents, playing D&D all night, things like that. And at the end of the summer, there was this swamp nearby, and they all knew that there was this like black dragon in the swamp. And I remember they decided the whole group, and there was like 7 or 8 kids, right? So and all of us playing, they were going to go get the dragon. They were going to go get his treasure. And I remember they got there, and the dragon just started mopping the floor with them. And I do remember, as the dragon was killing, Joe asked me, he's like, is there like a large chunk of treasure or something somewhere nearby that I could grab? And I said, yeah, there's like a big treasure chest nearby. And he said, I'm going to grab that and I'm going to run out the door. And as he ran out the door, the dragon breathed a line of acid at his back and hit him, failed to save. The 3rd level thief was no more, and the whole party got wiped. And the thing is I always remember that story. It's like, I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and I remember this is a character that like had lived so long, and I don't remember the name, and I doubt Joey does either. But I remember like we were sitting there, and he was just kind of like, yeah, so the acid hits you and you're dead, and he was like, okay. Yeah, there wasn't any big like no moment, because we knew like we were all going back to school and we could still play D&D, but not like we were playing before, and like just make a new character. Now, but here's one of the weird things about that, because of the fact that like we wanted our characters to be cool. One of the things about basic D&D is that everybody wanted to be an elf, even though elves took forever to level up. I think there was like 4,000 XP or something like ridiculous like that just to get to 2nd level. But the reason why you wanted to be an elf was because elves got to wear armor, they got to fight like a warrior or fight like a fighter, and they got spells as well. So the party would have like 6 elves in it. And why? Because they all wanted just to be able to cast spells and also be able to fight. So you could burst through the door, you could cast sleep, and then you could still be wearing heavy armor and swinging your sword around. And it was the way people played. And that was one of those things where like we didn't really. It wasn't until like we started playing AD&D a lot that we kind of divested ourselves a little bit of the idea that everybody was going to play the most optimized class, right? I mean, there used to be an argument over who had to be the cleric. There was like, somebody has to be the cleric. Somebody has to have healing spells, right? We used to argue about that. And yeah, so it was just one of those things where, yeah, crazy stuff back in the day. But that was kind of like the thing is that was kind of the beginning of everybody becoming the same, which is kind of where I'm going with this. Why D&D is eating itself. It's destroying itself. So as we progressed into AD&D and we started playing that, I still remember it was like, okay, here's all your classes in AD&D. You know, and you had more, right? You had the Ranger and the Paladin now. You had the Assassin now. You had the Illusionist now. You had other things. You had a Druid. And if you really wanted to try for it, you could be a Bard too. But regardless, so we had these things, right? That we kind of had branched off, and now people are playing different things. And I still remember when Unearthed Arcana come on, and I can't remember. I might misrepresent this, but Unearthed Arcana might have been for 2nd edition. I can't remember. But I remember when Unearthed Arcana came out, and I remember it added the Cavalier class, and we were just like, oh, and like people are like, and that actually allowed people as they gained levels to like actually increase their stats. It was like, which was kind of a weird and strange different option. But I remember other players like wanting to play the Cavaliers and things like that. And I remember also my buddy David Ingberg, he had heard of, like, he had gone to a convention or gone to a gamers guild meeting, which was our local gamers convention, or not gamers convention, gamers group that met at every month, and like once or twice a month at the Moorhead Public Library. And I remember he came and he had somebody had a dragon magazine that had this new class called the Psionicist, which was like a psionics class, and he asked the guy about it, and then the guy had this class, and he's like, yeah, it was in a dragon magazine. And I don't remember how we did it. Either we found that guy again and asked to borrow the dragon magazine, and then we photocopied each page, like front and back, so we had the rules for it. Or I mean, I think that's what we ended up doing. I mean, we did it that way. But then we had this new class, and since it was from Dragon Magazine, it had to be official, right? You know, and slowly but surely we started adding other things. When Dragon Magazine would print something, we would kind of add it to the game. But what really changed things up, in my opinion, for us, and like which really kind of started heading down a path of when we got to 3rd edition and 3rd edition Splat books and things like that, where we started adding more and more to D&D. Was when 2nd edition, we were playing 2nd edition, and that's when those like the complete like it was like the complete Warrior's Guide or whatever, and those and like Complete Mage's Guide, and I still have a lot of those books tucked away somewhere. But those books, they actually had in them they had these things called kits, and the kits were like ways, like different variants of the classic classes that would just kind of added certain powers and abilities. So like, and if I remember correctly, like there was a samurai kit, you know, so now you could play a fighter, but you were a fighter samurai, you know, and each one of those had those things, and we started monkeying with those, and we started, like, I remember one person made a fighter swashbuckler, because there was a swashbuckler kit, and just loved the character, and had a lot of fun with it. You know, so, I mean, there was stuff like that we played a lot around with, and we enjoyed it. We really did. And when we moved on to 3rd edition, and when 3rd edition really started coming out with all their prestige classes, and all their, like, basically just loading up all these characters with all these powers and abilities and changes, we enjoyed the options that we were being given, but we also started, as a group, we started shying away from it. We started shying away from multi-classing. We started shying away from, because what happened is that basically people started creating characters, instead of creating a character and creating an idea for a character, they were like, what can my bonuses be if I take this, that, or this? What can my bonuses be if I take this, that, or this? How can I optimize my character if I can do this, that, or this? And it, like, we found ourselves, all of us, power gaming without realizing it. And and we just kind of lost something. And it wasn't necessarily like it was bad or anything like that. I mean, like, you're always going to have power gamers sitting at your table. It's just the way it is. But if all of you are just want to make super tough characters, you like righting wrongs and smashing evil tyrants and killing dragons and what have you, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, if everybody at the table's having fun, then you're doing D&D right. But you are also, though, getting further and further away from what D&D was from the very beginning. So now we come up on like 3.5, which kind of streamlined a lot of stuff, and I still think 3.5 is a really good rule set. I mean, I know people who still play 3.5. If somebody said we're going to play a 3.5 campaign, I'd play in that campaign. I think that as at its core, it plays really well. I think it levels really well. I think you need to have a little bit of jurisdiction from the dungeon master to basically say, have a good session 0. And most games need a good session 0, but a good session 0 which says these are the things that I'm going to allow and these are the things I'm not going to allow, and make sure there's no misunderstanding whatsoever on anybody's parts. Now, when 4th edition came out, I'm not going to talk a lot about 4th edition because I really despised that edition of Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't enjoy it. I mean, I guess we enjoyed it. We enjoyed it sardonically, I guess. I remember I ran a campaign and we did it. We played it for about 3 months, I think, in 4th edition, and then I switched it to Pathfinder. But I do remember we had our fun. We definitely played it, gave it a fair shake. We poked fun at it, made jokes, laughed about it, and then we moved on. It was 4th edition was a marvelous tabletop encounters game. And I've said that many times over, and I stand by that. I think that there are still people out there who play 4th edition who really like 4th edition, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, if everybody at the table's sitting there having fun, I mean, Scott Alden, the guy who runs Board Game Geek, he talked about how he really enjoyed 4th edition D&D, and which makes sense because you could set up entire sessions of 4th edition D&D with just awesome battle maps and characters and like basically World of Warcraft type of powers and uses and things like that, and you could really have a lot of fun with it. So, and I see why that appeals to people, but it just wasn't D&D, and I still say it isn't D&D. Now, 5th edition, I'm not really going to go into a review of 5th edition, but the big thing about 5th edition, and as they come up with books like this, is that 5th edition is trying as hard as it possibly can to just basically make everybody the same. That's not necessarily bad, but what it is that D&D is, and let me explain what I mean by that, making everybody the same. So D&D and 5th edition is undergoing a massive like kind of like from top to bottom like perspective wash of everything that's there, and they are making it a point to try to make D&D a something that is welcome at any table, and it is welcome by any player at any table, is welcome by like any setting of any table, and I think that is good, and there's no but here. There's no like, I think, and yes, I am referencing like social change. I am referencing inclusivity. I am referencing doing away with the gatekeeping of certain people have over D&D. You know, I could talk for hours on this, and I really don't want to, but every single step that D&D is taking to make it a more socially aware game is a positive and great step for it to take. And I can't hammer away at that more than I am right now. I every single time that you make a change to D&D that makes it so somebody can feel more comfortable sitting at that table playing D&D is good. That is a good thing. And we should be doing that. We should be doing that in all aspects of society. And I applaud the designers and creators of D&D for taking those steps to make it. I mean, for example, just like anything that like has people like use things like preferred pronouns, or anything that like has people use like the idea of like, hey, if we talk about something and during a session 0 saying this is the topic of what this campaign is going to be, are there any topics that you as a player are not going to be comfortable with at the table that we discuss, whatever it is, it's like, scenes of great peril, or things that like you'd find objectionable, or and it's just like, and the fact that people are able to either express those, and like we're telling people it's like express the things that you have a problem with, or if you don't feel comfortable in public expressing that, messaging the DM, or just having the process of being able to put like like the note card that has the X on it, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google it, but being able to put that in the table, and then immediately everybody at the table just agrees, we're dropping that subject and we're moving on, and so people don't have to feel comfortable. I mean, those are good things, and those are really good things that we're including. And I have no problem with the fact that like orcs are no longer considered to be like evil, just automatically evil. Like they're moving away from like, oh, this is a race of evil beings. They're all evil and they can never not be evil. And just and things like that. I mean, fine, good. I mean, honestly, if you've been DMing for decades, such as myself, if you honestly haven't created like a good tribe of orcs at some point to like keep the players on their toes, I mean, why haven't you? I mean, there's something marvelous about being able to spin tropes and make the players like rethink. It's like, wait a minute, are we the bad guys here? I mean, there's things like that are very good. Now, however, and this is not a but, this is a however. There's like rules in this book that actually describe, oh, you don't like any of the races that are available to you, well then you'll go ahead and just make your own. And here's the rules for making your own race, and how many things you have as far as like bonuses or negatives and what have you. And you can just make your own. And if your dungeon master is okay with that, and you just want to make some, hey, I want to make a weird, rhino person, and they walks around, and these are the, okay, cool, awesome. You now have a rhino person playing in this game. Now, this being said, that is a great version of D&D, and I think it should exist. I'm not going to play it. I mean, and I can tell you right now, my game group's not going to play it. I mean, because we are, let me put it this way. If I was at a convention and somebody said, hey, I'd really like you to play in this, and I'm going to give you this rhino person to play, I'd be like, cool, whatever, I'll play it. Now, that's not going to happen in mine, because we play in an older school version of D&D, one that we created ourselves, and I've talked about that before. But that older school version that we play is like it's from first edition D&D. I mean, it's just it kind of bleeds it. It has a little bit of 3.5 thrown in, but for the most part, it's like a first edition D&D clone. And there's something kind of, I hate to say like sacred, because we're not, it isn't like holy or anything like that, but there's something that there's something about that version that just feels at home for us, and it's nothing like what 5th edition D&D is now. I mean, it literally is, there's no comparison. I mean, it's D&D, but it isn't. There's and yes, there are dwarves and elves and stuff like that, and pretty soon there won't be dwarves and elves in 5th edition. I mean, when 6th edition D&D comes out, I would be very surprised if races were mandatory. I would be like, I would not be stunned whatsoever when 6th edition D&D comes out, I mean, and theoretically they'll have another edition, right? Well, they'll just do away with classes, and people will just be able to say, I want to have magic, and I want to have this, and I want to have this, and they'll just make their own class, right? Which right now, just saying that, I'm like, that sounds kind of cool. That sounds kind of fun to play with. They'll do away with the classic. There's an elf, there's a halfling, there's an orc. They'll just do away with those, and people will just say, just create your own. Just, the world is your oyster. Or they'll tell the DM, create your own. And they'll have, and hey, here are the classic old classes of D&D that you can play with if you want to, but you don't have to use these. This is a variant. This is an alternate. And 6th edition will also be like, and here's like the classic old races, but you don't have to use these. These are optional. Allow your players to spread their wings and feel, and people make me think I'm thinking that's negative. Actually, that does sound kind of cool, and it does sound kind of fun, but that isn't D&D to me. D&D to me is playing in that tent, when I was 8-9 years old with Joe Giefer and all my buddies, and playing, using our flashlights to be able to read the dice as they rolled, and playing a summer's worth of D&D, and having the dragon kill them all at the end of the summer, and that was just a perfectly fine way to end a campaign. That's kind of like what D&D is to me, but it's fine. It's fine that D&D doesn't exist anymore. It's fine that that the D&D has moved on, and it's something completely different now. And there's a lot of people, and I will fully admit that I felt this way myself a little bit, but there are a lot of people out there that have that feel kind of betrayed by the way that D&D has changed, and by the way that it has altered. And I get it. I understand why people feel that way, and I understand why people are like, D&D's more popular now than it ever was, but I was the one who played it in the 70s and the 80s when Catholic churches were trying to denounce it and tell people. I had friends who couldn't play the game with me because they came from religious families, and they just had to like sneak in plays of D&D because their parents were convinced it was a Satan worship, and like literally, like, I was considered to be a Satanist by some of my friends' parents, and and there's something to the fact that I've paid my dues, and there's a lot of people in my shoes as well that paid their dues, to play D&D and persevere with D&D when D&D had gotten forgotten and just wasn't popular anymore, but it came back, and now it's full throttle, and more and more people are playing it all the time, and it's becoming more and more popular. So now it is up to us, the people that did pay our dues and who played it, in that era, to give up like our anger and our hatred over the fact that D&D has moved on. It's just like years ago, now almost 13, 14 years ago, when my last grandparent passed away. I'll always remember this. My dad got up and gave a eulogy for his mom, and he said, my mother had become an anachronism, which was a person at a time and place, and he kind of went on just how, like, my grandmother, who was 93, I believe, when she passed away, he is like, she never had a checking, she never had a credit card, she never drove a car, she never, just went through all these things that my grandmother had never done in her entire life, which was just like, she was an alien living in the world at that point. And that's how life is, though. As we get older, the world just kind of leaves us behind. You can try, and you can adapt, and you can become more a part of as the world just keeps on exponentially getting more and more what it is as it goes forward. You can try to keep up, right? And you can try and be a part of that. But I mean, but I watch what my kids do, and I watch as they like are just growing as exponentially as the world is around them. And I remember that was probably me too at that exact same age. And there was things that, like, you know, my parents didn't get about what I was. And the same thing with D&D. D&D is growing exponentially, and it's leaving the grognards behind. But that's fine. And the reason why it's fine is because it isn't like nobody's coming to my room, nobody's coming to my basement here and taking all of my old D&D books and throwing them into the fire and saying, you can't play it like that anymore. Nobody's telling us how to play D&D. We can still play the D&D that we have, even though, you know, very likely, you know, as time goes on, people are going to forget about that version of D&D and nobody's going to play it eventually. Nobody's going to care. But that's fine, because the new version of D&D is gobbling up all the old and taking the little tiny morsels and what have you of each previous edition of it, that the stuff that it wants to keep, and it is keeping on going, and it is becoming something that it never was before. And when you think about it like that, that's actually pretty cool. So there you go. I would just one last thing. I mean, this is a really good book. It has a lot of stuff in it, and if you're if you play 5th edition D&D, yeah, I think it's a must buy. Even if you don't, there's like suggestions in here for how to do puzzles and traps and things like that any dungeon master could use. And I strongly suggest taking a look at that as well. So, oh, and the pets. The pets are fun. My kids, we play 5th edition D&D as a family, and my kids really like the rules for the pets. They spent an entire Saturday coming up with their pets, and it was awesome. And we play with those pets, and people are having fun. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good book, and you should probably own it. But anyway, there you go. That was a super long video. I do apologize for that. For those of you who got through it all, thank you so much. Give me your thoughts. What version of D&D do you think is the best? What do you not like about X version of D&D? What's a version of D&D that you play that maybe I haven't taken a look at? I strongly doubt that I haven't heard of it. I strongly doubt that I don't own the book. I'm kind of a voracious consumer of RPG books. But if you think you got me stumped, I'd love to hear about it, because I'm always looking to add something to my collection. Thank you, as always, for taking time to watch this video. If you haven't already, hit the old like button, hit the subscribe, do the things. I'd really appreciate it. Until next time, be the best version of you that you possibly can be. Take it easy.